Michael J here for Real Talk about real estate. We have Alyssa Gregory with iHeart, and she's kind of taking a peek at this. Alyssa, do you have any questions about real estate before we get into this?
Well, I kind like my family is very involved with real estate as well. So I feel like every single day I talk somewhat about the market. From what you're explained, it's a lot of more of a seller's market right now than it is maybe a buyer's market, simply because there is less inventory and people are selling their homes for over asking price simply because that's all they have right now in inventory. So for the buyers out there, for them not to get defeated,
Right.
because I know a lot of people are probably writing more offers on houses than they ever have before with one client.
Absolutely.
What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I think it's more important now than ever to have a plan to go about this purchase, to make sure that you go into this process pre-qualified with a very good, clear understanding of what your finances look like and what your means are to be able to make an offer on a house. Buying a home, it can be stressful. I mean, it's buying a home, selling a home, both of them can be stressful even on a good day. So part of our job is really to try to help people, eliminate the unnecessary stress. And one of the biggest unnecessary stress is for a buyer to walk into a home and fall in love with a place and then say to themselves, all right, well, I have to find out if I'm qualified. I have to find out what it's going to cost me per month. Is this something that I can afford? That creates a whole nother level of stress that is entirely unnecessary if you go about this in a smart fashion. So getting clear on what you want, what you need, and what your finances look like, I think, is the first step here to ensuring that you go about this process in a successful manner.
So really, this takes planning before you're even ready to put your house on the market. You've got to have some answers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we sit down with all of our clients for a consultative session, usually 30 to 60 minutes, to get a real good understanding of what they're looking like. And then also to help them understand that the market that they're going to be entering. Because, the market, again, for a $200,000 to $400,000 house in Canton is going to be different than the market for a $200,000 to $400,000 house in Timonium.
Right.
Or Dundalk.
Well, you work all these zip codes and all these areas. Why don't we get into some specifics here? I mean, and nothing makes me crazier than watching one of these HGTV shows where they're putting a beautiful pool in and they don't talk about how much it costs. So if you could give me an idea, Mark, around the area, what price ranges are really moving quickly, and maybe which ones aren't moving as quickly.
Yeah, certainly. Well, first of all, the first-time home buyer market is definitely the most robust right now. It's the market that is experiencing, and has been for some time, but even more so now, is experiencing a pinch on inventory. So that that's around the entire.
What price range are you talking about? Like
I would say under 300, maybe even under $400,000.
Okay.
It's really when you get over $400,000 where the inventory levels start to increase a little bit, but still nowhere close to being a balanced market here. It really doesn't. It's until you get into like the 800 and above where you start to see still a buildup of inventory. And in the 7-figure and above right now, there's actually, I would actually contend that it's not a seller's market in that market right now at all. It's a buyer's market. There's way more inventory. I think there's way less people making moves at that price point right now.
Let's talk about that first-time home buyer that you brought up. And I remember very, very clearly buying my first house for $98,000. And I remember it was the most stressful, deal to ever go through because it was a lot of money to me. It was
Right.
the first time I ever, invested in a house, and I had a lot to learn. So one thing I would love to let people know is that you don't need to be intimidated. And
Mhm.
if you are a new buyer, you can speak with Mark, and Mark, you can kind of walk people through, the questions of how much money you need to have in money to put down in earnest money, and
Yeah.
what are some of the obstacles that you're facing these days as a new home buyer?
Yeah, well, first of all, for that for that part too, I think that some of the biggest misconceptions is that, because you are not a first-time buyer, maybe someone who's bought a home, they're buying their second home or third home, that they have a lot of experience in this, and that their questions are they shouldn't have as many questions. And the fact of the matter is the markets, the mortgage markets, the real estate markets, they changed so much, so that if you bought your first home 6 years ago and are selling today, it's a different mortgage market. It's a different real estate market. It's a completely different landscape. So we really, to a large extent, whether you're a first time home buyer or buying your second home or even your third home, we really try to educate people the same way, because the things that you need to know as a second time buyer or third time buyer they can be very different than what it was like when they bought years ago.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
It does. So where is the financing market at right now?
Yeah. So
is it a good time?
Yeah. First of all, that's probably what's leading the demand right now is that interest rates are so attractive. I mean, you can get a 30-year loan for under 3.5% right now.
Wow.
We're seeing, actually, I saw today that there was a 15-year loan product. Someone locked in on a 15-year loan for in the low twos, 2.25%.
And is this with points or is this without?
No points. You have closing costs associated with this, but that's for a conventional loan right now. You can do conventional loans with as low as 3% down. They have a lot of conventional products for 3%, 5%, 10%, and 20% down. Your FHA loans, your standard FHA is 3.5% still. And of course, you have VA financing that's out there for buyers where they can buy a home with no money down.
So are we still doing first-time home purchases for what, 20% down, 10% down?
Very rarely do we see first-time buyers putting 20% or 10% down.
Okay.
In this market, we're seeing typically first-time buyers are putting down 5% or anywhere from 3 to 5% down.
And that's acceptable. You're getting mortgages with 3 to 5%.
Oh, absolutely, all day.
Wow. So that's good to know. So let's just work some really rough numbers. Let's say you found a house in Bel Air or Parkville, or Timonium, and let's say the house is $250,000. So you're telling me that for roughly $12,500, which would be 5%, you'd put $12,500 down. You'd have closing costs. You might need $20,000 to come to the table with to buy the house.
Yeah, I mean, on a $250,000 home, actually, you could get into a home like that for far less. With 3% down, you're looking at $7,500, and yeah, you will have closing costs probably about $12,000. But oftentimes we're successful in negotiating for a seller to pay those. Almost all of them, if not all of it. So, I wouldn't look at $20,000 as the litmus test. It really is in a scenario like that.
Right. Now, and here's the thing to remember for anyone watching this who is paying, $1,200 a month in rent, $1,500 a month in rent. That's very common these days that people are spending those kind of. Alyssa, how much are you paying in rent?
My rent is $1,500 a month.
Exactly. And do you split that with anybody else, or do you pay it?
I pay it.
Okay. So at the end of the year, let's just walk through this scenario. At the end of the year, she has spent $18,000 in rent. That's 12 months times $1,500. I'm just doing it off the top of my head.
Yeah. So, that's someone else's mortgage too, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, it is.
But here's what's important to remember. That $18,000 that Alyssa is spending is gone. She's, now she didn't have to worry about if the heat didn't work or if there was an issue, but $18,000 is gone. Now, in a situation where Alyssa owned a house, if she spent, let's say, that same $1,500 a month on a payment, roughly 1/3 of that payment, which it would include the interest and the taxes that she pays, is going to come back to her as a deduction on her income taxes. So in reality, that $1,500 payment becomes suddenly really a net cost of maybe like $600, $700. Right. So, and not to mention the appreciation that you possibly could get moving forward as your house goes up.
And even if there's no appreciation, part of that $1,500, it's a small portion at the beginning of your mortgage here,
Of
but
course.
probably $250, $300 of that every month is going towards your principal.
Exactly.
Where so that's even if in a break-even scenario from appreciation, you're still well ahead of the game.
Right. The best lesson that I learned, Alyssa, is when I was 28, my dad said, buy a house, and I've had houses ever since. And, I've learned lessons. There was a point in time where I always thought it made sense to buy the most expensive house you could and leverage yourself. I think that scenario has changed a bit because, as you say, the higher end of the market is not in the same situation as the $200,000-$300,000 level. But it's a great way to start building up some equity, and rather than put the money in someone else's pocket, which Alyssa's doing. And I understand there's a lot of considerations when you're not sure where you're going to be, and you want to know you're going to be someplace for a few years. And
Absolutely.
we're living in a challenging time with COVID that is definitely affecting all that. And let's speak to that. Now, someone who wants to put their house in the market, Mark Simone, tell me about some of the issues that are evolving, let's say, with, the coronavirus issue.
Yeah. So, we've realtors are really instructed across the state to make sure that they themselves and their clients are being smart and following the CDC guidelines, making sure that they're wearing masks when they walk into a home. Some of them are even going an extra step to wear gloves when they're walking through a home. One of the instructions that we give our clients is to make sure when you have your house available for showings, is to have some hand sanitizer available for people to use as they walk in and when they walk out. But also just some finer tips, like keeping your doors open, all the interior doors open, and having your light switches all turned on, so people don't have to go into a house and really touch anything. Even when I'm going through a home and helping a seller evaluate their home and assess their home, I'm doing the same thing. I'm asking them, I'm like, I'm able to keep my hands pretty much on my sides and in my pockets, and being able to take notes, but letting them lead the way, make sure the doors are open, leave the lights on for us. And it really allows us to leave no fingerprints throughout the house on the way through that journey. We're also advising people to not bring their whole family out. Sometimes, especially first-time buyers, they want to bring, mom and dad or their grandparents or their aunt and uncle or their friends to help them, because looking for a house is fun and exciting, and it can be a familial experience.
Sure.
Not really in these times, right? Right now, it's we're trying to lessen the crowds and be respectful of the owners who are living in these homes.
Of course. And now we talked about the position from the buying standpoint, from the selling standpoint. Do I need to be afraid of a lot of people coming through my house?
Yeah, look, it's a tough question. If you ask Dr. Fauci, I'm sure he'd give you a different answer here. You have to be smart about it. You have to be okay with it. Like if you have underlying health concerns, and it might be, and you have to sell, or you really want to sell, maybe depending on the strategy around selling your home, maybe you find an alternative place to live while that house is on the market.
Right.
In this market, it's not a very long time. We just had a few clients we put on the market on Monday, and on Wednesday they're under contract, and they had a lot of showings, a lot of activity. Their lives were disrupted for 2 days. Then they go in there, they send a cleaner in, scrub the place down, and then they move back in.
If you don't mind me asking, what price range was that house in?
One of them was in Green Spring Valley for the list price was $430. We sold that above list. We had another one in Parkville. That price point we listed at $300, and it also sold above list.
Wow. This is really good information. And I know you're not a psychic and things are changing pretty quickly, but in your best guesstimate, in the next, because I want to visit with you regularly, and we're going to check back in another month or so. But where do you see the market going? It's now July, the beginning of July. Let's say between now and Labor Day, where do you see this market?
I'm not really I'm not really certain, obviously. You know, one of the lessons that I've learned through this whole COVID environment is that there's so much unknown. You know, if we talked in March, I would have had a very different prediction for the housing market. And even in April and May, those things have changed. You know, the involvement of this pandemic and the length of the duration that we're experiencing here is unpredictable. And because of that, I don't see this virus going away, this pandemic going away in the next month or two. So I don't expect these conditions to really change all that much. I think that from a market condition, we're seeing interest rates creep down.
Right.
And that's a good thing if you're a buyer or a seller. I mean, I think a great example is, you know, one of our clients, the one that we got under contract here in Parkville, she was qualified a year ago for $350,000. And now she still wants to keep her monthly payments exactly where she was looking to a year ago, but now she's qualified for $375,000.
Oh.
So it's interesting, you know, to be able to look at the cost of money and how it relates to housing here.
I want to bring up a point that I think you just made me think of that is really important. If you are buying or looking to buy a house in the $400,000 price range where there is a lot of demand and less supply right now, you want to make sure from a buying position that you are in a position of strength, because you may be competing with other potential buyers.
Absolutely.
So the first thing you want to do is make sure you've got a pre-approval. And what you do want to do is you want to make sure that that pre-approval letter is not drawn up until you're ready to submit your offer. Because let me give you an example. If the house is $300,000 that you're trying to buy, but you're pre-approved for $350,000, you don't want to tell the seller that, because you might be trying to get it for $290,000, $295,000. I mean, you don't want to let them know that you have more money in your pocket than you've got, right?
Well, and actually, I'll tell you what, that's advice that I typically have given to people for a long time. And some of that advice I actually would counter to it is in this environment right now, especially when you're in multiple offer situations, you know, it's not about showing the seller that you qualify for the purchase price.
Okay.
It's a beauty contest. If we can show them that you qualify for way more than the purchase price, then it gives the seller a lot of confidence that, like, all right, this person's debt to income ratio is not smacked up to the ceiling.
Oh, that's true.
You know, if they go out and decide to finance the purchase of their next mattress,
right,
that it throws off the purchase.
Wow.
So it's counterintuitive a bit. You know, you want to keep your cards to your chest, but in a competitive environment like this, a lot of the discussions that we have, especially with our sellers that are in multiple offer situations, is making sure that we don't just pick the highest price, but we also pick the seller, or the buyer rather, that is most likely to get to the table.
Gotcha. Good information. Yeah. That's really, really good. Mm-hmm. So this is the kind of stuff you need to, you know, discuss with Mark and really get a handle on what you need to do, because you need to make a strategic plan for where you're going to go, either buying or selling. And really, I know you handle more sellers yourself, but you've got agents who work under your agency that are also doing specifically for buyers, right?
Yeah, we have some great agents on our team that work with anywhere from 50 to 100 buyers a year. I mean, they are fantastic. That's all they do. You know, they're out showing houses. They know the inventory. They've been in most of the homes that are for sale. And so that part is really nice too. When we have clients that come to us and tell us what they're looking for, in a lot of ways, they're already able to play matchmaker because they've seen what's out there. And so, yeah, you know, our agents are here to help, and they love being out with clients in the field, showing houses, being able to help people make this exciting transition.
Well, Mark, we have learned a lot, haven't we, Alyssa? We have learned a lot today. Let's kind of review what we've learned. We've learned, if I follow this correctly, Mark Simone of the Simone Group, that in the under, let's say, $400,000 price range, houses are moving quickly in just a matter of days, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We have learned that on the high end, though, perhaps it's a buyer's market, because in the 800, 900,000 or seven-figure market, there are houses that are just sitting. And I personally know of houses, you know, in the under $2 million category, but 1.5 to 2, that are sitting for years and not selling.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the hope is. I mean, there are a lot of these super big McMansions in the county that, there was an explosion of those houses in the 90s and into the early 2000s. And it just seems like the demand has really dropped for those.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's been a bit of minimizing that people have done and reallocation of what's important to them.
We've learned that you really need to be prepared when you go into your deal. We've learned that, hey, it's probably a smart thing to consider buying a home if you're spending $1,500 a month rent. Just saying.
Yes, we've also learned that interest rates are really, really good right now.
Yeah, you know what? Historically, Mark, do you remember? I know you've been in this for 17 years. Have rates ever been this low before?
No, not at all.
Bottom line.
There may have been some periods where they got really close to it. And they, I remember people would say rates, they can't go down anymore. They're only going to go up. Well, here we are. They are down.
Yeah.
So that's a huge incentive. You get to buy more home for your money, and you can have more variety, more selection to choose from, is really what it comes down to. So I say get started. Mark, why don't you one more time give out your contact information so people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 443-863-6700. You could also feel free to email me personally at mark@thesimonegroup.com. And
it doesn't cost anything to sit down and kind of go over things and get
absolutely started. There's zero sales to it from our perspective. We'd like to be able to give good consultative advice. When the timing is right, we just like to be able to be thought of as the first resource here for you.
There you go. Mark Simone and the Simone Group, Real Talk on real estate. We'll do it again very soon. Maybe let's make a date to do it again before the end of summer.
You got it. You got it. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for your time.
Yep. Same here.